The galaxy stretched out in every direction, a vast expanse of stars, planets, and civilizations, all intertwined in a web of power and politics. At the heart of it were the oldest and most powerful empires, each controlling vast swathes of space. They were the rulers of the stars, the keepers of knowledge and technology, and their dominance was unquestioned for centuries. These empires stood tall and unchallenged, their fleets, unmatched, their armies feared across the cosmos. But then came Earth, and with it the human race, who had only recently discovered space travel and barely made a dent in galactic affairs compared to the behemoths that surrounded them. Earth was new to this game, and everyone knew it. The humans were seen as nothing more than a curiosity at best, a small species in a corner of the universe, with little hope of ever making an impact. They were given a ship, a relic of old technology, the Harbinger. It was slow, underpowered, and outdated. Its weapon systems were laughable compared to the galactic standards of the time, and its crew consisted of civilian soldiers and scientists who had no real understanding of the intricacies of space warfare. The crew of the Harbinger were mostly young, untested, and naive in the eyes of the galactic powers, and even Earth's military leaders had low expectations for the ship. Most assumed it would be nothing more than a minor footnote in the grand saga of the galaxy, but there was something the galaxy had missed about the humans and their ship. The Harbinger wasn't special because it was the strongest or the most advanced. It wasn't the ship's weapons or armor that made it dangerous. It was the human spirit that made it truly unique. The drive to survive and thrive against impossible odds was something that the galaxy's empires couldn't understand. They were accustomed to control, to absolute dominance. They relied on their technology and their advanced knowledge to maintain power. But humans relied on their creativity, their willingness to think outside the box, and to take risks that others would never dare to take. It was on a routine patrol near a small outpost on the edge of galactic territory that the Harbinger would face its first real test. The outpost was on a remote planet, a place that few cared about until the day it was attacked by a powerful alien fleet that descended upon it with terrifying speed. The attackers were ruthless, an alien species with superior weapons and technology. Their goal was simple: wipe out the outpost and eliminate any trace of human presence from the galaxy. They had no reason to fear a ship like the Harbinger. They thought it would be an easy victory. Captain Hannah Walker, the commanding officer of the Harbinger, had no illusions about her ship's chances against such a powerful force. But she refused to back down. The Harbinger would not run from the enemy. Instead, she made a decision that would change everything. They would fight back with everything they had. The battle began with the Harbinger outmatched and outgunned. The alien fleet descended upon them with ferocity. But Captain Walker had a plan. She had studied every angle, every tactic, and every weakness in the enemy's strategy. Her crew worked tirelessly to put their unconventional tactics into play. They didn't have the firepower to match the enemy head-on, but they had something the aliens didn't expect. The Harbinger used the planet's terrain, the asteroids in orbit, and its old technology to their advantage, turning the tables on the attacking fleet time and time again. The enemy was confused and disoriented. They couldn't predict the humans' next move. As the battle wore on, the alien fleet began to fracture, unable to cope with the unpredictability of the humans. And in an unlikely turn of events, the Harbinger managed to escape with minimal damage, leaving the once formidable enemy in disarray. The galaxy took notice of the event. Whispers began to spread about the weakest ship in the fleet. The humans had made an impact no one had expected, and now the galaxy was left wondering just how far the humans could go. The news of the Harbinger's unexpected victory spread like wildfire through the galaxy. The once dismissed humans were now the subject of speculation and disbelief. The might of the galactic powers had been challenged by what was supposed to be a simple and weak species. The aliens didn't know how to react. Some scoffed and called it a fluke. Others wondered if there was more to this strange new race than met the eye. The Harbinger had somehow managed to survive a fight it was never meant to win, and now the humans had their first taste of the galaxy's attention. For Captain Walker and her crew, the victory was bittersweet. They knew that they had only won a small battle, and the war was far from over. Earth was still a small player on the galactic stage, and despite their unexpected success, they were outmatched by far more advanced forces. The coalition of empires that ruled the galaxy had vast fleets, weapons that could obliterate entire worlds and technologies. The humans could not even begin to comprehend they were at the mercy of the galaxy's powers, and everyone knew it. But that didn't stop the humans from pushing forward. The victory had shown them one thing: they didn't need to play by the same rules as the others. They didn't need to fight the way the galactic empires fought. They didn't have to rely on overwhelming strength. They had something far more dangerous. They had the ability to adapt, to think outside the box, and to fight in ways that no one else would ever expect. The Harbinger quickly became known as the Ghost Ship, a mysterious vessel that would appear out of nowhere, wreak havoc on unsuspecting targets, and then disappear before anyone could respond. The humans didn't fight fair. They didn't follow the protocols of warfare. They used the terrain of space to their advantage. They used their enemies' own systems against them. They used intelligence and sabotage to turn the tables in their favor. The galaxy had never seen anything like it before. The humans began to strike where it hurt the most. They attacked supply lines, crippled enemy fleets. With simple but effective tactics, they spread misinformation and chaos among their enemies. They didn't have the firepower to match their opponents, but they had the ability to disrupt entire sectors and leave their enemies fighting among themselves. Soon the galaxy's most powerful empires began to take notice, and they didn't like what they saw. A small species with no regard for conventional warfare was causing chaos across the galaxy, and the more they tried to fight back, the more unpredictable the humans became. They used their knowledge of alien technology to their advantage, studying the weaknesses of their enemies and exploiting every opening. They found the Harbinger's crew had become masters of hit-and-run tactics, sabotage, and misdirection. They left no signature, no trace of their presence except for the damage they cause. The Harbinger's strikes were swift and precise. Whole fleets found themselves outmatched and unable to catch the elusive humans. They could not predict where the Harbinger would strike next, or how the humans would twist the rules of war to their advantage. And with each successful attack, the humans gained more allies from the oppressed species of the galaxy. Those who had been ruled over for centuries now saw the humans as a symbol of rebellion and resistance. The galaxy's power structure was beginning to shift, and it was all because of one thing: the Harbinger had shown the universe that the human spirit was not something to be underestimated, and that even the smallest ship in the fleet could become a catalyst for a much larger change. The once quiet systems of the galaxy were now in turmoil as the humans and their ghost ship became a symbol of rebellion across countless planets. The Harbinger's small but calculated strikes began to inspire the oppressed species that had long been crushed under the heel of the galactic empires. Whispers of revolt spread like wildfire. Every species that had suffered under the tyranny of the powerful alien factions now looked to humanity for hope. They saw the humans as the spark that could ignite a revolution, a chance to throw off their chains and reclaim their freedom. It was in the darkest corners of the galaxy where the first real signs of rebellion began to emerge. On planets where the alien empires had ruled for centuries, there were suddenly murmurs of resistance. Hidden underground movements began to grow, and it was no coincidence that these uprisings began shortly after the Harbinger's unexpected success. The galaxy's most powerful factions were scrambling to contain the chaos caused by the humans, but the more they tried, the more it spread. The fire of rebellion burned brighter with each passing day. The humans were still a small force in the grand scheme of things. Their numbers were few and their technology still far behind the galactic powers, but they had something the empires could not replicate. They had the will to fight and the ability to inspire others to join their cause in the face of overwhelming odds. Entire planets that had once cowered under alien rule now rose up in defiance. The galaxy was beginning to change, and the humans were at the heart of it all. The Harbinger had become more than just a ship. It had become a symbol of resistance. Its crew, a ragtag group of individuals from all walks of life who had found purpose in the fight for freedom. They were no longer just a crew. They were the leaders of a revolution, and their actions spoke louder than any fleet could ever hope to. But as the rebellion began to spread, the galaxy's most powerful empires were not sitting idly by. They recognized the threat that humanity posed, and they knew they could not allow this spark of rebellion to spread any further. The leaders of the galactic powers formed an alliance to crush the human threat once and for all they sent their most experienced fleets to deal with the Harbinger and any other human vessels that had joined the cause. They would not allow the fragile balance of power to be upended by a species that had no right to challenge their rule. Despite the overwhelming odds, Captain Walker and her crew knew that they could not back down. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The humans would either rise or fall in this fight. The crew of the Harbinger had no illusions about their chances. They knew the enemy was too powerful to defeat head-on, but they had proven time and again that they didn't need to follow the rules of conventional warfare. They didn't need to face the enemy in a direct battle. They had something far more dangerous than firepower. They had ingenuity and an unrelenting drive to win. In the shadow of the coming storm, the Harbinger's crew began to make plans for their most audacious move, yet they would not wait for the enemy to come to them. They would take the fight to the heart of the galactic powers and strike at the very foundation of their control, with a strategy so bold and unpredictable that the empires would have no idea how to respond. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but it was about to learn that the humans were not a species to be ignored. The galactic empires were scrambling their fleets and resources trying to eliminate the growing rebellion, led by the humans, but the more they tried to crush the resistance, the more they found themselves caught in a web of confusion and instability. The Harbinger and its crew had proven that they could not be easily predicted, and now the rebellion had spread far beyond what anyone had imagined. Entire systems were beginning to rise up, joining the cause of freedom and liberty. What had started as a small and isolated movement was now a force to be reckoned with. It wasn't just about the Harbinger anymore. It was about every species that had been crushed under the boot of the galactic empires. Those who had lived in fear for so long now saw an opportunity to stand up and fight back. They no longer had to hide in the shadows. They could rise with the humans and show the galaxy that they would not be oppressed any longer. The once unchallenged galactic powers found themselves in a state of disarray as their most trusted systems began to crumble under the pressure of these uprisings. Their fleets stretched thin, trying to fight on multiple fronts and deal with internal dissent. Their intelligence networks were infiltrated and sabotaged from within, and they were losing more ground than they were willing to admit. Whole sectors of space were slipping from their grasp, and the humans were always at the heart of it all. In this new power vacuum, new alliances began to form. Some of the previously neutral or weak factions saw the tide turning in favor of the humans and decided to ally with them, seeking to avoid the wrath of the galactic empires. In doing so, they strengthened the human rebellion, making it even more difficult for the empires to maintain their grip on the galaxy. The humans had become a unifying force for the oppressed species. They were no longer just the underdog. They were the voice of a revolution that was spreading like wildfire. Captain Walker and the crew of the Harbinger found themselves in a position they had never imagined. They were now the leaders of a rebellion that spanned across several sectors, and their next move would determine the future of the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher, but they knew that they could not back down from this moment. They had taken on the galaxy's most powerful empires and survived. Now they had the chance to strike a decisive blow against them. Their plan was simple yet audacious. They would target the heart of the galactic powers themselves, the capital worlds, where the leaders of the empires resided, and where the most vital resources and technologies were kept. They would strike at the very core of their enemy's power and force them to reconsider their position. They couldn't fight on all fronts at once, but they could make the empires face a threat they hadn't expected, a force so unpredictable that they could no longer rely on their size or strength alone. The Harbinger had proven time and again that it could slip past the enemy's most advanced fleets and launch surprise attacks with devastating effect. Now they would use their greatest weapon, not their firepower, but their ability to disrupt and destabilize the very heart of the galactic powers. No empire could withstand such an unpredictable and relentless enemy for long. As the humans prepared for their boldest move, yet they realized that they had already won something more important than any battle. They had won the loyalty of countless species across the galaxy, and that loyalty would carry them forward into the next phase of the rebellion. They were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for a new future for the entire galaxy, and the empires would soon learn that nothing would stop them from achieving it. The preparations for the daring strike against the heart of the galactic powers were underway. The crew of the Harbinger knew that this mission could either define the course of the rebellion or spell its end. They couldn't afford failure, not when they were so close to achieving something that had once seemed impossible. The galaxy had watched as the humans and their allies spread like a wildfire across the stars. But this was the moment when everything would come to a head. They would either succeed or burn out in a blaze of defiance. Captain Walker stood on the bridge of the Harbinger, staring out at the vast expanse of space. Before her, the ship had become more than just a vessel. It had become a symbol of hope and resistance for countless species that had joined the rebellion. But now it was time to push forward and strike at the very core of the Empire's power, the heart of the galactic capital systems, where the leaders of the empires held their dominion over the galaxy. It was a place heavily guarded, surrounded by fleets and defenses that no ordinary ship could survive. But the Harbinger wasn't ordinary, and neither were the humans. As the Harbinger made its way toward its target, the tension in the air was palpable. The crew had trained for this moment, but even they knew that there was no way to fully prepare for what they were about to face. Every detail had been accounted for: the distractions, the misdirections, the hit-and-run tactics that had served them so well in the past. But now they were up against something much larger and far more dangerous. This wasn't just about surviving the enemy. It was about delivering a blow that would shake the very foundation of the Empire's control. The plan was simple. They would infiltrate the galactic capital's defense network and use their knowledge of the Empire's systems to disable its most critical infrastructure. The Harbinger's crew would sabotage supply lines, communications, and most importantly, take out the central command structure of the galactic powers. It was a bold strategy, one that depended on speed, surprise, and above all, the ability to stay hidden long enough to complete their mission before reinforcements arrived. The closer they got to their target, the more the weight of the mission began to sink in. This was no longer a small rebellion taking potshots at an enemy fleet. This was the final act in a fight that had the potential to alter the fate of the entire galaxy. The galaxy's greatest powers would not let this strike go unanswered. They would come after the humans with everything they had, but Captain Walker wasn't concerned with what would happen afterward. Right now, her only focus was the mission. The Harbinger would slip past the enemy's detection systems and strike where they least expected it. There was no room for error. If they failed, the entire rebellion could be crushed in retaliation. But if they succeeded, if they could break the capital's control even for a moment, they would force the Empire's leaders to rethink everything they had ever believed in. It was a gamble that the crew of the Harbinger had already defied the odds more than once, and they weren't about to stop now. As they neared their target, the crew of the Harbinger fell into a tense silence, each person aware of the enormity of what they were about to attempt. They had no way of knowing whether they would come out of this alive, but they knew one thing for certain: they would not go down without a fight. The storm was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Harbinger slipped through the shadows of space, moving with the stealth and precision of a predator closing in on its prey. The ship's crew worked with a quiet intensity, each person focused on their role, knowing that the fate of the rebellion rested on their shoulders. They had made it this far by relying on their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies, and now they were about to face the most dangerous mission of their lives. The heart of the Galactic Empire was just ahead, and they had only one chance to make their mark. Captain Walker stood at the helm, watching as the galaxy's greatest stronghold loomed in the distance. The capital world was a sprawling city of metal and glass, protected by layers of defense systems that seemed impenetrable. But she had led her crew through impossible odds before, and she would do it again, with the fire of the rebellion burning behind her and the hope of countless oppressed species depending on her success. They were within striking distance now. The central defense grid was nearly in range, but the tension on the bridge was palpable. The air was thick with the knowledge that once they crossed the point of no return, there would be no going back. The fleet would be on them in an instant, and every second counted. As they neared their target, the enemy began to stir. The vast array of defense satellites and fleets surrounding the capital system activated their alert systems, scanning the space around them. The Harbinger's approach was being detected. The calm silence of space was shattered by the first warning lights flashing on the bridge. The crew worked furiously to stay ahead of the enemy's reach, but they could feel the walls closing in as reinforcements from all directions began to mobilize. But Captain Walker was ready. She knew this was coming. The humans had always been a step ahead of the Empire's strategies, and they had prepared for this moment carefully. They couldn't afford to engage in a full-scale battle. They needed to hit fast and vanish into the void before the enemy could retaliate. She gave the signal, and the Harbinger moved into the next phase of the plan. In a series of rapid maneuvers, the ship darted through a maze of enemy ships and defensive platforms, relying on every trick they had learned to stay hidden, to remain invisible to the galactic powers that were hunting them down. It was a game of cat and mouse, one that the Harbinger was determined to win. The crew activated decoys and scrambled the enemy's tracking systems to buy themselves precious moments as they closed in on the central command hub of the galactic capital. The tension on the bridge was unbearable. The crew's eyes were fixed on their screens as the seconds ticked down. The heart of the Empire was within their grasp, and with it the chance to deal a blow that could change the course of the galaxy forever. The Harbinger was not a ship of war, it was a ship of rebellion, and in this moment it was about to prove its worth. Suddenly alarms blared, a warning so loud it pierced the silence of the ship the Empire had caught on, and they were closing in fast. The vast fleet began to shift into position, ready to strike down the humans and eliminate the Harbinger once and for all. The time for subtlety was over now. It was a race against time. Captain Walker stood firm, her voice calm and steady as she issued orders to her crew. They would not let fear control them. They had come too far to back down now. The fate of the rebellion was in their hands, and they would not falter now. The storm was coming, and this time the galaxy would feel the full force of its fury. The enemy fleet closed in from all directions, their vast armada surrounding the Harbinger as it weaved through the stars in a desperate attempt to complete its mission. The pursuit was relentless, but the crew knew they couldn't afford to panic. They had come this far by relying on their instincts, and their ability to adapt. The Harbinger was a symbol of defiance, and no amount of firepower would make them back down. Captain Walker stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes sharp, focused on the holographic map of the surrounding area. The galaxy's greatest powers had underestimated humanity's ability to disrupt and outthink them, but now the rebellion was at its peak, and the Harbinger was at the heart of it all. There was no turning back. The capital system loomed just ahead, the central hub of the Empire, where the leaders of the galactic powers held dominion over everything. The human crew had studied it for months, learning every weak point, every vulnerability, and now it was time to strike a blow that would cripple their ability to control the galaxy. If they could breach the heart of the Empire's operations, they could send the entire power structure into chaos and buy the rebellion precious time to rally their forces. The fleet was closing in fast. The enemy ships were growing larger on the screens, but Captain Walker had no intention of letting them catch up. She had one final card to play, and it would require everything she and her crew had left. The Harbinger wouldn't survive a direct fight, but it didn't need to. What they needed was precision, a single strike that would echo across the stars and shake the foundations of the Empire to their core. As the enemy ships surged forward, Walker gave the signal. The Harbinger launched into an unpredictable series of maneuvers, slipping between the gaps in the enemy's fleet, using every scrap of data they had gathered from months of skirmishes and covert operations. The crew worked as one, their every move synchronized as they pushed the ship to its limits. The capital world's defenses began to shift as the Harbinger closed in. The enemy fleet scrambled to adjust, but it was already too late. The human ship was like a ghost in the storm, slipping through the cracks of their calculations. The harrowing truth was becoming clear even to the mighty galactic powers. The humans had learned to exploit their weaknesses, and they had learned quickly. The Harbinger made its move, slicing through the outer layers of the defense grid with an efficiency that took the enemy by surprise. It wasn't a battle, it was a surgical strike. The crew's mission was clear. They had to reach the command center at the heart of the capital and disable it from within. They couldn't afford to waste time engaging the enemy forces directly. They had to be faster than the Empire's response. As the Harbinger neared its objective, alarms blared across the ship. The enemy had finally caught up, and the battle was beginning in earnest. Massive blasts rocked the ship as the shields flared and shuddered under the impact, but the Harbinger held strong. Its crew refused to falter. They had come too far to let this moment slip away. Now they would finish what they started. The core of the Galactic Empire was within reach, and the rebellion was on the verge of something greater than anyone had ever imagined. The enemy was strong, but they were no longer fighting against just a ship. They were fighting against a revolution, and the galaxy was about to find out how far humanity was willing to go to bring it down. The Harbinger's engines screamed as they pushed the ship beyond its limits. The crew worked tirelessly, their hands flying across control panels, as the ship danced through the enemy's fire, narrowly evading destruction. With each twist and turn they had one objective, and they were determined to see it through no matter the cost. They were within the heart of the Empire. Now the Central Command Center was only moments away, and nothing would stop them from completing their mission. Captain Walker stood tall at the helm, her eyes locked on the vast capital world growing larger with each passing second. The tension was unbearable. Every second mattered. As the Harbinger surged forward, its shields flickering under the barrage from the enemy fleet, they were being hunted, but they had no intention of being caught. They had planned for this moment, and they would not fail now. As the Harbinger pushed forward, the crew activated the final phase of their plan. They had studied the inner workings of the Empire's command center and knew its weak points. Their attack would be swift and precise. One strike at the heart of the Empire's ability to command its forces would send shockwaves across the galaxy. It would cripple the Empire's response and disrupt the communication channels that had allowed them to control so much of the galaxy for so long. The ship shuddered as another blast hit their hull, but the crew kept moving undeterred. The Harbinger was not built for conventional combat. It was built to outwit and outmaneuver its opponents, and that's exactly what they did. Using the debris of the previous battles to shield their movements, they made their final approach towards the command center. The galaxy's most powerful fleets were close behind, but the crew of the Harbinger had already passed the point of no return. Captain Walker issued the command to engage the final phase of their plan, and with that the crew sprang into action. The ship's systems powered up as the crew deployed their most dangerous weapon, a virus that would infiltrate the Empire's central command systems. Within moments, the vast network of military control would be crippled, leaving the fleet leaderless and confused. As the virus spread through the command center systems, the effect was immediate. The enemy's fleets faltered, their communications were scrambled, and their command structure broke down. The Harbinger had struck a blow so powerful that the Empire's iron grip on the galaxy began to loosen. Their coordinated attacks turned into chaos as their most important assets became useless in the face of the humans' ingenuity. But the crew knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would not change overnight. The Empire would retaliate with everything they had, but now they were vulnerable, and the rebellion had a chance to grow and strengthen before the galactic powers could regroup. Captain Walker watched as the enemy's fleets struggled to regain control, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that they had truly done it. The galaxy had shifted, and the era of the galactic empires was starting to crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. The humans had proven that even the weakest among the stars could turn the tide of the galaxy through determination and strategy. They had awakened something in the galaxy, something that had long been dormant, a spark of hope that would light the way for those who had been silenced for so long. The rebellion was far from over, but now it had a future, and humanity would be at its heart. As the Harbinger disappeared into the stars, the galaxy knew that a new dawn had arrived, and with it came the promise of change. The Empire would not be the same again.